Here we go. Alice Walker said, and I quote, "Even when we feel we can't change things, it's important to have awareness of what has happened. If you are unaware of what has happened, it means you're not alive in many respects. And to be unalive in many places within yourself means you're missing a lot of the experience of being on this planet. And this planet is not to be missed." So I ask all of you, what are you missing on this planet? What do we all miss under the guise of staying safe? Safety is an impediment to wholeness. It forces us to hold strong to what has already been, blocking the light of new. Claiming one's wholeness is nothing less than soul work, but it must be done. To become whole, we must do two things: shed our skins and be courageous enough to steal the most precious pieces from the hearts of others. Now, do not make a note to look this up in a book later. Neither books nor statistics can support you in achieving your wholeness. I had to learn the hard way that wholeness is openness and non-judgment and a willingness to become a different person tomorrow than you are today. Wholeness is an ability to share soul-deep connections with others because you're so connected with yourself. But before, we must acquaint ourselves with our souls. My own journey towards wholeness was immediate. From the moment I took my first breath, my very being was strapped and buckled into a parachute harness, and I was dropped into my destiny. Right then and there, I could feel the risk involved in being truly alive. But being unalive was unacceptable. Being born into the four walls of my brown body, I was charged with the task of staying safe and becoming whole at the same time. I was acutely aware that the world had already minimized my existence. I was female and of color. Like the womanist from which I came, I chose the wholeness in the world that wasn't readily offering it to girls that looked like me. I had to take mine. Womanism has always been in my blood, long before I held an Alice Walker book. But once I ingested this sacred concept of Alice's, I could finally exhale, just knowing that she and other women also lived with these constant hunger pangs of needing more than what we've been given. As a womanist, I'm compelled to resist that which tries to shrink me. I have learned to demand that others see me how I see myself, awoke, nuanced, and of course, whole. My mother was my first womanist role model. Through my little girl eyes, I witnessed something like God constantly pushing her, assuring her, promising her that she didn't have to remain as small as her beginnings. This God gave her permission to have the things that her heart desired. Her God allowed her to just be. My mother saw more for herself than the world saw for her. Although raised in a devoutly Christian household, her siblings never questioned what they were taught. My mother not only questioned it, she abandoned it and chose to walk her own spiritual path. Tradition and history could not paralyze her. In the early 1950s, my mother left the only place she had ever known, Cincinnati, Ohio. "I'm moving to New York," she said, a place that she had only visited in her dreams. First, the family laughed. You know, that nervous laughter of those afraid to see what they are missing on this planet. Then they cried tears of certainty, knowing that they had already lost her to the world. My mother's move to New York City was her crowning moment. Sadly, she died way too soon, before we ever talked about what it means to be a Black woman. Over a glass of wine, we never had a chance to discuss and debate these heady concepts of wisdom and womanism and what it means to be whole. We never got to keep the secrets that women keep. She never told me how she truly felt about that woman who used to sleep in her bedroom with the door locked for over a year. Perhaps I was too young for an explanation, but I saw all that I needed to see. Permission to love without condition. My mother was my inheritance. But we all know that inheritances come with good and bad. Perhaps she didn't realize what she was doing to me when she thrust me into an all-white community of little girls who looked nothing like me. They were daughters of New York royalty. Their fathers were rock stars and TV newscasters and CEOs. None of them looked like me or my mother or anyone we had ever met. As a first grader, I was way out of my depths, an intruder sent in to kick down the doors of exclusion. It was a world clearly not meant for me, but my mother insisted that it was. To become whole, we must do two things: shed our skin and be courageous enough to steal the precious pieces from the hearts of others. Shedding my skin did not imply that I rejected my blackness, but it did require me to be more than black. Being black could not be my most important feature. We are not merely the color of our skin or the tragedy of our pasts. It can't be, or we'll miss the planet in all of its glory. Once I grew to disband with my singular identity, I was ready to really be with my classmates in all of their rich girl innocence, an innocence that we all shared equally. Becoming friends and bonding with them and their families showed me how much more there was to me and to them. They were not merely white or rich or the daughters of millionaires. From their hearts, I stole the precious parts, their love of nature and animals, their passion for excellence, their thoughtfulness and generosity. I also learned from them to laugh until my stomach ached. Their laughter was always loud and resonant, never subdued or muffled by prudishness or good manners. These girls lived out loud and showed me that I could too. But the most important thing that I stole is how to carry myself with pride and expectation, like they did. My mother was right. I belonged there. And my classmates learned a lot from my heart as well. They felt how a life shatters when a little girl's mother dies suddenly on the New York City subway. They learned how to gently bring me back from the dead with their friendship and their love. My peers saw what a father-daughter relationship could look like when a father's priority is not his next million, but his daughter. They learned that love doesn't always mean material things. They learned from me that there is a spirit out there, and we all must find it. And they learned that being other never means being less. Of course, the experience of being amongst the rich and privileged wasn't as easy as it sounds. In my house, the discussions of the realities of race were my lullabies. My father would never allow me to forget. He berated me with his own enraged stories of the South and slavery and indignity and Jim Crow. He taught me how insufferable the world is. He told me that the world is racist, exclusive, and forbidding. I fought him, knowing what I believed of my white friends. He would say, but it's my job to prepare you for how the world is and how it will always be. There's no room for little black girls in a sea of wasps. He was wrong. And he was right to push me to the brink of myself, propelling me to hold on to the parts of me that he feared that I was shedding. To become whole, we must do two things: shed our skin and be courageous enough to steal the precious pieces from the hearts of others. I finally heard him. I had to go reclaim the truth of my blackness. Thanks to my family in Cincinnati, I was immersed in music, which is where I discovered my original self. Despite my family's urban struggle with inertia, Every summer, my mother sent me to them, a new set of lions to tame. It was an annual pilgrimage to whence I came. They were Black people, my family, who didn't understand who I had become up in New York. With very little in common and a long summer ahead of us, they did what my people do. They fed me music like it was food. One by one, my cousins would dip me into the warm, soothing waters of disco, R&B, and funk. The drums, the horns, the rhythms, the wails, woo! With these sounds, my heart grew out of my chest. They nursed me on the irresistible sounds of Blackness. As I fell in love with it, I stole their passion right out of their hearts, taking back what was rightfully mine. To this day, music nourishes me. It brings the blood back into my paled face. It strengthened my mind and loosened my limbs so I could dance with my cousins through hot summer nights. As I grew older, I found myself just as comfortable with Neil Young as I was with Funkadelic. I could waltz at the Waldorf Astoria and dance with my drunk Uncle Jack at backyard barbecues. My wholeness was emerging. I moved comfortably in both worlds because I was finally comfortable with myself, a womanist who no longer needed to fit in. Soul work, indeed. If not for a womanist's hunger, where would I be? As a writer, I would be deprived of the stories, the characters, and the love affairs that have ignited my imagination. Where would I have been without allowing my heart to roam freely in places to which I was not invited? Safety is an impediment to wholeness. With it, we suffer the violence of disconnection. So I say to you, let us not miss a thing on this precious planet, for she is watching.